Here we go. We're live. Welcome to the after party.
Welcome to the after party.
We're on Facebook and on YouTube tonight.
It's a big night.
Yeah.
We've never done
We
that?
did that before. We did it one time before, but we had problems. So there were some issues when we tried it before, but we're trying it again. We're doing
Things
our
are
best.
looking up for us.
It's true.
Yeah. And also we're in double digits now for our episodes.
I know, episode 10.
Ooh, 10.
Look out.
Let's do a top 10 list.
Top 10 list? Oh man, we should have prepared that.
I know,
We didn't get
10
that ready.
feels a bit
Top 10?
much.
I'm going to take my hoodie off.
Top 10.
This week I was walking my dog. I
Yeah.
was joking about my hoodie before we went live, but I was walking my dog and I saw someone from church and I had my hood on and I had like big headphones on like over top of the hood. And I saw this person. I was like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, you don't look like you want to see anybody right now. And I'm like, well, I'm walking my dog. But then we stopped and chatted 6 feet apart.
Yeah, good.
So it was good.
Oh, good. I really love actually talking to strangers.
Do you?
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Really?
I love talking to strangers. So you have to look out for me.
Nice.
But I was walking through a neighborhood close to Bankview, where I live. And what happened? I stepped onto the street. There's a couple on the sidewalk. And I kind of was like, I might say like a full sentence to them.
So awkward. So awkward.
I know, it was terribly awkward, actually. So there was somebody like across a huge lot, a big schoolyard on a swing. And the swing was really squeaky, like so.
And that shut you down. You were just like, okay, I can't compete with that.
No. And I just was like, hey, that swing needs a little grease, right? And I was just like, it's kind of a funny thing. Like it's quiet out here, but you can just hear this sad, lonely swing.
Just in the breeze? Or was there a person on it?
There was a person.
Because that would have been funnier if it was just in the breeze.
Person, like, it was kind of a sad scene. But I just said that to these people thinking that we might like have a little conversation about like nothing.
They just kept their, they just,
I got like a hoodie.
Put their headphones back on.
Totally. Yeah, I didn't get a like.
Hey, there we go. Ashley has switched platforms here. YouTube people. All right, that's the way to do it. And welcome, Jason. Good to see you guys.
That's great.
I agree. Sometimes YouTube's, it's where it's at.
YouTube's,
I don't know. I got nothing against Facebook.
Nothing?
Yeah, I got nothing against Facebook. Just like using it if you're gonna watch us on Facebook.
Oh, okay. I mean, I thought we were talking big questions about Facebook. I'm like, we probably should have something against
That's
it
hilarious.
sometimes.
All right. Today, before we start talking, are we gonna do check-ins? You want to tell us a story?
I thought that was my story.
Oh, that was the story. All right.
No.
I thought that was an off-the-cuff story.
Yeah, it was 100% off the cuff. Okay. It wasn't even a good story.
It wasn't your prepared story?
I did bring something, though.
Okay, let's see it.
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah. Is this what I heard about this morning?
Yes, I made cookies. I made cookies.
Look at I can already tell. I'm impressed by the shape of them.
There's 4 in here.
Wow. So
they're, what are they? Chocolate chunk cookies with a little bit of buckwheat flour.
A little buckwheat.
Yep. And they're from Bon Appetit's Baking Magazine issue. And if people are around me much, they know I talk quite a bit about my friends at Bon Appetit. So this is Sarah's recipe from Bon Appetit. I already sent Ashley a message about the fact that I made them. I'm just noticing that the chocolate came off this one. So
and they look
Okay.
You got 2 apart?
You can, I'm going to offer you.
This is like a double-decker cookie.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to split it.
But let me also say that I put chocolate, I chopped up some really nice chocolate to go in these cookies. And one of the chocolate bars was a lavender dark chocolate. So it's going to give you some like hints of lavender.
Hints of lavender.
Hints of it.
So I'm not a big cookie connoisseur. Mm-hmm. It's not really my thing.
Right.
These are good. You know what I like though?
What?
I'm not sure what the technical term is.
Yeah.
But they're greasy. You know what I mean? Like
you like them greasy? Or?
Yeah, like when they're all flattened out and chewy.
Yeah.
I don't want them like plump and cakey.
Right. That's what this is.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I like that. Also, salt on the top.
Yeah, I threw some salt on there.
That's where it's at.
That's what Sarah told me to do.
Mm-hmm. I don't know who Sarah is, but she is correct.
It's good.
Can I have one, Jason? If only we were allowed to have some people here. We would definitely give you one.
Absolutely. So yeah, so that's.
Am I supposed to eat this the whole time? I'm going to be like.
I know. I mean, you might just want to try it. Leave it for later.
Oh, good though.
It's not bad, right? Yeah. I liked it.
I like
I'm
it
not
too.
doing a lot of baking. Mostly enjoy cooking, but
yeah,
dipped my hand in.
Dip my hand in. Where did you get some lavender into the baking?
Okay, it was a chocolate bar.
It was in the chocolate.
It was in the chocolate bar, so it was like really lovely. You know, when you get those, like someone gives you a gift. So this was a birthday gift actually, and it was a lavender dark chocolate bar. Very fancy.
Yeah, and then you used it in your cookies.
I did.
That's cool.
I could have like eaten little bits of it for a month and enjoyed it. But
that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
I like to get the like salted dark chocolate, and then I just like a little piece is fine.
I thought that, but then I was like, oh my gosh, lavender in these cookies, next level.
Okay. Here's what I made tonight. This is not baking.
What'd you make, Jer?
Made a new drink. What's it called here?
I honestly brought these cookies hoping that someday you'd mix me a drink before after party.
If only I could get that here. Tim's cup in a pitcher. I mean, it's called a leading roll.
That's what our after party needs.
Oh,
just like
there you go. Like a pitcher of tea or something like that, or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, called a leading roll. Okay. 1.5 ounces of I use Johnny Walker Black.
Okay.
1/2 ounce of Pimm's.
Okay.
3/4 ounce of lime. 1/2 ounce of honey syrup. 2 dashes of Angostura.
Yeah. Shake
with ice. Strain. It was very nice because it had this. Like a little bit of herbaceous and spiciness from the Angostura and the Pimm's cup, a little smoky from the Johnny Walker Black, but then like a good sweet citrusy lime and honey vibe. There. It was. That's what I'm working on. I'm working on summer cocktails right now. So
I mean,
this was a good one.
You don't live in a huge house. Like, where do you keep all your bottles? Where do you have a serious liquor cabinet stash? I mean.
There's a lot of variety. So
yeah, that's exactly it. I'm not saying that you're drinking all this stuff all the time. I'm just saying like you rattle off this ingredient list.
But I make my own syrups and stuff. Yeah. So
like, where are you keeping all this stuff?
Just little bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have like a second fridge for all my bitters and bottles and my syrups and stuff.
Okay.
So my Gastrique that I made a little while ago.
What was that?
Gastrique. It's like vinegar and caramelized sugar.
Okay.
And then you flavor it with. You can do it with fruit or something. So I made a strawberry Gastrique.
Okay.
So you take sugar.
Yeah.
You gotta caramelize it.
Oh,
so you gotta keep stirring it over low heat.
Yeah.
Till it browns
so it doesn't burn.
But then straight 1 cup of sugar and then 1 cup of like just vinegar.
Oh.
And then it like hardens, but then you got to keep stirring it till it softens all up.
Yeah.
And then you flavor it with some usually fruit or something like that.
Yeah.
Then you strain it, put in a little bottle, and you put that in your drink or,
Is it like a syrup consistency?
Yeah, kind of like that. So you use them in shrub cocktails.
Shrub cocktails?
Yeah, or you can use it in
rosemary or something. What's a shrub cocktail?
Shrub cocktail is a vinegar based. So instead of like a citrus, you use vinegar.
Oh.
So it's very good though. It's an interesting.
No idea.
I'm learning. There we go.
Learn on.
I want that cocktail recipe, Jeremy. All right, I'll post it.
Yeah, didn't you post a recipe recently on
your
personal Instagram
and
story?
Zoni. So also
go again.
Yeah, very good. Like a summer version of a Negroni, which is my favorite cocktail.
Okay.
But this was Campari, gin, lemon, simple syrup, muddled with white grapes.
Right.
And then strained.
Right. I remember we talked about this.
It was serious.
If somebody who wasn't into cocktails, just didn't drink a lot of cocktails, but was like, oh, I'd like to try some cocktails. What's like entry level cocktail, like classic?
I don't even know how to answer that because like if your palate, like if you lean more to sweet or citrusy or bitter, there's a lot of different things. But start with the classics like a Negroni and an old fashioned, a gimlet. Yeah. Start with those and then you can branch out. There you go. All right.
All right. Also,
how did we get down that road? Anyway,
the
cookies took us there.
Yeah, exactly. The cookies took us there. But also, I've been keeping you posted on my new knife.
Oh yeah.
I got a new knife.
Bobbi got a shun.
Yeah,
It's a very nice knife.
It's a lovely knife, and I've had like okay knives, but I've known for a while like I needed and wanted to kick it up a level. So I got Jonathan.
Do you remember Emerald,
got me
like the chef from Louisiana? He used to always say, "Kick it up a notch" every time you say that.
That's it.
I'm like, I think that Emerald guy.
Which is perfect. That's really on point. So I got a new knife, but I've been thinking about skills that I like that I need to sharpen, as it were, in terms of like even knife placement, like as you're preparing. So I had one little nick already with this thing, and it was just because of where I like laid it out, and it was too cluttered on my cabinet or on my counter, and I nicked like the little corner of my finger, like.
Yeah, if you're not used to working with sharp knives, but sharp knife, you will cut yourself less with a sharp knife.
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
So tell me something. I've been wondering about like knife placement. So like you cut some things, and then
my knife skills are pretty mediocre.
Oh, are they?
Compared to like chefs and stuff, but
of course,
it's
just you and me here.
Yeah, all right.
I have no one else to ask.
So you gotta make sure you hold up. Right up at the front, like where the bridge is. So you get good weight.
Totally.
And you kind of want to hold it so that it's balanced.
Right.
So it's not falling over.
Right.
And then when you're slicing, like, are you just chopping?
Yeah. Yeah, right. So the claw.
Yeah, you do the claw with your
Still
knuckles.
Working on that. Yeah.
And move that back and just chop up and down on that.
Right. So, and then if you're setting your knife down, do you have like a way that you do that?
I don't have a great thing, but I have a magnet wood block on my wall.
So even between like chopping something, stirring something, you put it back on.
I have so little counter space in our house. So our house is tiny. So your place is too. So ours is, Rachel and our place is about 980 square feet. You guys are like 550 or something?
532.
Yeah. So
every bit.
So I have like these magnet wood blocks right up on the wall so that as I'm cutting, I could just like plop it back up. So I have all my knives right there. Okay. So.
Okay, here's my last knife question.
So Daryl's saying, I've heard about knife people, but never knew one until now. I love it.
Okay.
If you want to know about knife people, check out Knifeware.
Oh man,
they're amazing.
That's where Jonathan got my new knife.
Yeah, and the owner's on Twitter, and he's great. He does lessons on sharpening, all kinds of stuff.
They do really, really neat things, and like a bunch of different people do their like Facebook Live videos and stuff. Very cool. So, and they send, so we ordered it online and it, came to our door, and they send like really neat little stickers and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. It's like a knives for the people sticker. It's great. So here's my other question. When you're cutting an onion, do you let's talk about this for a moment. So
what are you trying to do? Are you trying to dice it?
Yeah. Dice an onion. So cut it in half, peel the stuff off.
Yep.
Now, do you slice through, slice this way, then slice this way? Yes.
So you take the whole half.
Yeah.
And then so it's sitting like a ball.
Yeah.
And then you slice in a couple times.
Yeah.
But not right to the end.
No, we're not to the end.
So just to the end, so it all stays together.
Yeah.
And then you slice this way.
Yes. And then the other.
But again, not to the end.
Right.
And then you chop down on it.
Right.
And then you'll be left with a little chunk at the end. You can throw it out, or you can dice it on the tabletop there.
Okay, so when you're doing this is new with you need a much sharper knife than I had to do. That's one of the reasons I wanted a new knife. I was like, I want to cut an onion that way. Also, when you have a sharper knife, you tear up less.
Oh, is that true?
It's a true thing. I saw it on like Food 52 on a video.
I always wear goggles.
Always?
No, I'm just kidding.
I love that.
But it would have been funny if I did.
I was like, you need to be making those stores in your kitchen. Okay, so this slice into the onion, I'm still struggling with it even with my sharper knife.
Like just to get it straight?
Yeah, like not just to should it go so smooth? I feel like I'm still like sort of struggling with it. Like, am I putting too much pressure? Like, or is it just practice?
It's probably just practice. Like, if you hold at the back of the onion, there shouldn't be a lot of weight in there.
Right. Maybe that's it, is I'm holding a little bit too much on top.
Yeah. And you're pushing down on it. So just hold at the back and then you can slice in. And you can do a little bit of a saw.
Yeah.
Especially when you're going like that. You don't want to do too much because when you do a saw, it pulls away sometimes. Right.
So. Well, the point about the sharper knife and less tears is like it's like you're not smashing the enzyme.
You're not compressing it.
Yeah.
I buy it.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Okay.
All right, so that's our food talk.
I mean, I have not as fancy knife as you. But I have nice knives.
You have nice knives.
I have global knives, which are Japanese steel.
Yeah.
But they're not as beautiful as
That's
Shun.
it. Jonathan was like, I wanted to get you one that was beautiful. He did all the research.
That's
Did we
great.
talk about this already here? Maybe just on the team. But Jonathan made a spreadsheet. And
how are you going to buy something without a spreadsheet?
I would never do that.
I don't even know how you would purchase something if you don't make a spreadsheet. I'm totally with Jonathan on this one.
I love it so much. So anyways, the knife he ended getting it was like a classic 8-inch Shun.
Yeah. So
chef's knife.
If you want a beautiful knife, get a Shun. If you want just a really good workhorse Japanese steel knife, globals are excellent, but they're not as pretty. Like they have a metal handle.
Right. This one is a really nice, like dark, some kind of wood. That's great. Okay, so there we have it.
My husband made a Coke Zero spreadsheet.
What on earth?
I just found out there's like 1 million Coke Zeros. Or Cokes,
so it needs
Cokes or something. I don't drink pop. But Kevin was explaining, like, there's all kinds of Cokes and Diet Cokes and caffeine plus Coke and caffeine free Coke. And then Coke that has no sugar but does have caffeine. And then there's like a whole bunch of, if you don't want sugar, you got all kinds of different not sugars in your Cokes.
Wild.
And then they have flavored non-sugared Cokes.
Okay.
So you would need a spreadsheet just to understand what's going on.
I'm so curious about what he's like.
Can't even buy a Coke these days.
What's he tracking?
He's just keeping track of the Cokes.
Like the ones he liked and ranking them? Is it a ranking system? Is it details? Is it like tasting notes?
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. What are we here? We're at 7:17. We haven't talked about anything important yet.
I mean, cooking's important.
Cooking is important.
Knife care is important.
He figured out where the cheapest Coke Zero was. Like it comes to, I would assume that something like that would be mandated in price by like Coke, the company.
Wild.
But whatever.
That's great. That's so good. Okay. So we could talk today about the beginning of our series.
Yeah, you started a new series on Sunday.
A new series, How to Be Angry. What else happened this last week? We
introduced Ryan.
That's right. We introduced Ryan to it.
So it's a very interesting time as a staff to be saying farewell to someone like Jeannie, who's been such an important part of the team for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, so long is relative because Commons is only, not quite 6 years old.
Right.
But of those not quite 6 years, Jeannie has been on staff for 5 of them, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of the history of the church, she's been here for 80% of the church.
Right.
So, I mean, someone who has that kind of tenure, who has done that much to shape how the community has evolved and who we become is a really important transition.
Yes.
So to be saying goodbye there, but then also to be hiring someone in this time where, we're not in the room and the community is all dispersed in different ways. It's been sort of an interesting process to figure out how to do that well, honor those stories and make people feel loved and all these things.
Appreciated.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of gratitude.
Yeah,
without a party. Without a party.
And we still have some time to do that. We've got another big farewell for Jeannie coming at the end of the month. But this week was the introduction for Ryan.
Yeah.
So was that little a little say hello there.
It was really nice.
Some people probably know Ryan already. But if you didn't, you got a chance to meet her a bit on Sunday.
Right.
I Zoom interviewed her.
Yeah.
So
that's with the times.
Yes, exactly. So we did that, and then I think that was about it from the service. Yeah. Yeah. Scott did a really beautiful prayer.
Really lovely prayer. Yeah, reflective.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we should mention before or chat about it, but we have another new episode of Between Sundays coming out tomorrow morning.
Yep.
So that's exciting too.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
Rachel Duplessis.
Rachel Duplessis, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and we actually did that recording just before COVID-19 anything. So there's not one mention of pandemic, face masks, like social distancing. It doesn't come up.
Yeah.
So we recorded this conversation with her first, and I kept thinking, like, when will it fit? Because we released the season in the time of COVID-19. And finally, we're getting down to the last 2 or 3 episodes. And I thought, okay, I'm going to revisit the conversation with Rachel and see, like, is it time for this one?
Yeah.
And it is. I really think it is. It's great. So there's no mention of COVID-19, but it doesn't.
You know what? That's kind of nice.
It actually
we got
is.
This far into the podcast without mentioning COVID-19. Now I'm realizing.
You did this, Bobbi. We're just kind of like,
we didn't mention it until the moment where we talked about how it wasn't mentioned in another podcast. Oh, man.
It always gets
we got
us.
so far.
It always gets us.
COVID-19.
I know.
Well.
But the theme for that episode is contempt. And it's kind of a long episode. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, which I know is a long time.
What else we got to do?
But it's really good. And I know that there was some wisdom I was searching for around the issue of contempt in relationships as sort of like bearing witness to people's like end of marriage stories and the way that people tell the story like as a marriage is ending, that I've been like wondering, there's been something unsettled in me for a long time around that and this theme of contempt. And Rachel delivers up this bit of wisdom. And as soon as she says it, I lose it. I'm like, there it is! Like, that's what I've been looking for it feels like years. So I hope that people will stick with the whole episode around this theme of contempt.
Cool.
And she also has such a lovely, calming voice.
Oh, okay.
So it's just like, I end up having like a lot of bursts of like laughter and interruption. But Rachel's just so calm and she sits with the question and she's a great model of like how to talk about hard things and how to listen into like tough conversations. So I love the episode.
I have friends that, it was just interesting hearing you talk about that. Their marriage just ended, but they've just been this really neat model of how they've done it well. And they just did a little video with their daughters and stuff, sort of celebrating or sort of like saying goodbye. That was the sort of last night they were all four of them were in the house together and doing a bit of a cheer and, saying goodbye to that moment and stuff, which I thought was a really sort of beautiful moment in terms of how you take sort of these really difficult moments that all of us go through. Yeah. How do you do them well for the people around you and not just for them, but for yourself? Yeah. To come through that in a beautiful way. Yeah. And I think sometimes if we did a better job of honoring the beauty in those types of stories, I mean, there's so much that we could take away from that if we did a better job honoring all kinds of beauty in the midst of difficult stories. Yeah,
I'm almost like about to spoil the moment that I've like left as a cliffhanger. But it's I really think that thinking about like beginnings of relationships and ending partnerships and nobody sort of sets out in a committed partnership to be like, in 15 years I'm gonna hate your guts. Like how do people get there? It happens all the time. So Rachel has some great language around it, pulls in some of Gottman's stuff. It's great. But again, just like the big picture of that episode is like, you're not going to hear pandemic talk, and it's actually really nice that the themes are still really appropriate to our life all the time. And her voice is so calming. It's just so nice. I read this quote and she says, I'm just going to sit with that for a minute. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I did that a little bit more, So I was about to answer a question. I was just like, let me just sit with that for a minute.
Now I'm blanking on it, but there's a quote in the quote reel for this series. That's something about, I don't know, be slow to speak and quick to read and quick to think and low to, whatever. Okay. We'll bring back to the quote reel whenever we read it again. So it's a good one for anger.
It's a good one. Keep watch for it.
All right.
Okay.
What do you want to talk about today? You did a sermon.
So I did a sermon, how to be angry at God. And I chose sort of some strange texts.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about this series.
For months I went back and forth in my mind. And then I'd be like, nah, I think we should just like pick some Jesus stories, go to the epistles, maybe something more common. And then I'd sit down with those chapters and I'd be like, no, this is it. Like, then I'd go away from it, wouldn't look at it for a few months. And I'd be like, no, we should really go. I had this like internal conversation. These are kind of strange texts. It's obscure, unless you grew up with VeggieTales, apparently.
Man, so many VeggieTales comments. People were super into. So I didn't watch VeggieTales as a kid. I mean, I've heard of them, but I don't really know much about it.
As soon as somebody said it in the chat, I thought, oh, there is a VeggieTales about this. But again, it's not at all. It did not come up in my imagination or my memory at all when I was preparing.
Nor mine.
And then I could sort of hear the
Oh, there it is.
Jingles.
Think before you speak and read before you think. That was from last week. Yeah, I like that one. I like that quote. Anyway, that's sidetrack.
Ashley's so good. Ashley
on the quotes.
On it.
It's so funny.
On it.
Because I think you and I, or maybe Kevin and I were talking. We do these quote reels for every sermon, and we have for years.
Yeah.
But they're always sort of like in the background because coffee. The coffee break's happening, and then we put the quote reel on as people come back.
I always think that they're really great for introverts who don't want to talk to
exactly.
other people. So that gives them something to do. And that's largely what they're for, is it's like some cue to come back to your seat. But now all of a sudden, they're like a featured moment in the sermon. People are like, look at all these quotes. And like, for years I've been working on gathering all these quotes, making these videos. And they were so lost.
Now everyone's like, oh.
This is your moment. Your quote moment.
All my work on these quote reels over the years has all paid off all of a sudden.
Do you remember any of the voice?
Thanks to COVID-19.
Do you channel Eaton?
My son says it like that all the time.
Do you remember any of the voices that you pulled? Because honestly, I didn't see them.
I don't, because I did it like a year ago.
That's right.
So I did, I watched them on Sunday, but I don't really remember much from it because I pulled all those quotes. Yeah, like probably 14 months ago when I put the series together. So.
Right.
When I put the quote reels together, you put the series together.
You
put the series together.
Your mouth.
Getting angry over there?
Always.
So, speaking of, listen to that segue.
Yeah, so good.
It's almost like we planned it. We did not.
We did not.
That's the narrator.
They did not. Yes. So, how to be angry. We just kind of chopped it up into, I chopped it into 3 parts, how to be angry at God, how to be angry at others, how to be angry at yourself. And you're going to take that one.
Yeah. Apparently. That'll be fun.
Try to get out of it.
I started looking at it this week. So
okay, great. Yeah. It's a probably the strangest text of the 3.
It's super strange text.
Really strange.
Yeah, it is.
I still think the themes are there for us.
Yeah, we'll find out. So I haven't started writing it because I wanted to listen to your sermons.
Yeah.
And I've had a chance to read, part 2 and stuff. Mm-hmm. So now I'm starting to think about it. But yeah, I wanted to sort of round it. But Daniel's a strange book, though.
It is so strange. Yeah.
Like for people who haven't read it, go read it.
Yeah, please.
But first of all, but you introduced it in the series.
Yeah, really, I sort of said it like, there's your crash course.
Yeah, But essentially what we have is there's the story we know about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego getting thrown into the fire furnace. Yeah. Everyone kind of knows that a little bit. And Daniel in the lion's den, he gets thrown in the lion's den.
Yeah, we're not going there.
Yeah, but in between that is just it's this weird prophetic book where everybody's having dreams and they're all like interpreting them or trying to interpret them and going back and forth. And
the first chunk of chapters are these narratives, like these court tales, and then the last section of the book is apocalyptic. Yeah. So and I love that it kind of has all these polarities. Like it has 2 different languages. It's Aramaic. It's Hebrew. It stretches across these timelines from Babylonian, these exiles in Babylonia to when it's written, like hundreds of years later, under Persia. So by these Jewish scribes kind of looking back to make sense.
So this is what I was talking about is one of the real sort of key questions in terms of source critical analysis of Daniel. So Daniel has all these predictions, quote unquote, about what's going to happen to these empires, these successive empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome.
And we get a hint of it in this dream, this first dream in chapter 2, where the statue has these parts. Yeah. It's gold head, silver, bronze, iron, and clay.
Yeah. So are they representing these successive empires? And they are. And so
which ones?
Yeah. So, but the question has always been how do I want to say this? Maybe I'll say conservative scholarship has always dated the story of Daniel within the lifetime of the character Daniel.
Right.
So that this person who's writing is predicting all these successive empires.
Yeah.
However, the critical data, and again, when we talk about higher criticism, we're not talking about being critical as in putting down the Bible. We're just talking about using all the tools at our disposal to analyze the Bible. all of that information would tend to tell us that the writing of Daniel is hundreds of years after all these successive empires. So it's looking back on the history.
And that was definitely what I leaned into.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's sort of the frame that I think we're all taking in this series. But that's the sort of, I would say that's the consensus in critical scholarship.
Yeah.
Is that Daniel is written post-exile, looking back and trying to make sense of what happened in the exile, sense of how they were conquered by Assyria and then Babylon. Right. And then how Babylon could be conquered by Persia and then Greece and then Rome. And how did they end up in this situation? Yeah. So and I think you can even see that from the text. You don't even have to go outside of the Bible, but the way the story is written, it's trying to make sense of the exile and why it happened to us. It's not a fortune-telling kind of book, and that's not what prophecy does in the Old Testament. There are moments where prophecy is about the future, but the prophetic in the Hebrew scriptures is primarily about making sense of the world as it really is, right? There's a sense that we're not seeing things clearly. We're not seeing history clearly. Right. We're not seeing our moment in history clearly. Yeah. And so the prophetic is the voice that comes in and sort of strips away what's there and reveals to us. And you use the term apocalyptic. Yeah. Which is the genre that the second half of Daniel fits in, which is, I've done a lot of my academic work in apocalyptic literature, which is a really problematic genre for a number of reasons, because the genre does not get defined until centuries after the New Testament is written. Right. So it's a little anachronistic when we use apocalyptic back on Daniel, which is intertestamental.
That's interesting. That didn't come up in I did a lot of reading.
Yeah. So
people were very happy to slap that title. Like a lot of great scholars were very happy to use that. And I never, I just didn't find.
Yeah. So same thing happens in Revelation scholarship. Yeah. So Revelation is literally the apocalypse of John. Yeah. But the term apocalyptic genre comes from Revelation.
Okay.
It's like, oh, look at this style of writing. Yeah. So, when John is writing Revelation, he's not writing apocalyptic literature. Right. He's writing the Apocalypse of John, which later on we say, oh, that defines a genre. Did
no one else do apocalyptic?
Tons of stuff in there, but it wasn't. Yeah, so there's the Apocalypse of Abraham. There's all these different apocalypses, and I write them about my thesis, but they weren't categorized as a genre until after the fact.
Okay, right? And what about outside of our tradition?
So it's not. The genre of Jewish apocalyptic literature.
We're talking Jewish apocalyptic
is not named until the second and third century. Yeah. So there's people writing these kinds of things.
Yeah, okay.
And that's and then we look at those, and then we look at Daniel like, oh, well, he's writing that kind of thing as well. Yeah. But it's not like there were rules to what the apocalyptic genre was. Yeah. And so once you get into genre studies, you find like everyone has a sense, okay, clearly Daniel, Revelation, the Apocalypse of Abraham, all these things fit in a category together. Yeah. But what are the rules of that category?
Yeah, I guess, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the title of the thing, because I know that, in terms of like dream and dream interpretation, there was this like Babylonian tradition of dream interpretation. So that's what I was sort of looking for. Like, was there something outside of Jewish apocalyptic literature doing the thing that was maybe not called the thing?
And a very big thing in Egyptian writing as well is this whole dreams and interpretation stuff, which that's what you're seeing in the Joseph story. Yeah. Heavily influenced. I mean, Joseph is the story that takes the Jews from the land of Abraham or into Egypt. Well, the primary narrative device in that story is the dreams that first Joseph has and then Joseph interprets. Right. That's an Egyptian storytelling technique that the writer is now using to move the story into, it's brilliant stuff from a literary perspective. Yes. But the writer is using a known Egyptian narrative technique to move the Jewish story into Egypt. Right.
It's interesting that you mentioned Joseph as well, because there's links between this Daniel dream interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Joseph and his interaction with Pharaoh's dream. Yeah. So there are all of these like really neat kind of callbacks.
Yeah, and these layers and stuff like that. Yeah, and that's what's happening with apocalyptic. We all know all these texts fit together somehow. But then you'll read all kinds of scholars that will give you different definitions of what qualifies something as apocalyptic.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it's like after the fact, we try to make a genre out of this. Right. Now, my argument in Revelation, which is not related to Daniel, is, it is. Yeah. It pulls from Daniel a lot. Okay. But my argument is that there are nascent rules to the genre that have been emerging in the 200 to 300 years before Revelation. I'm going to argue that Revelation is written in the late first century, somewhere between 80 and 120.
Okay.
But part of what the writer is doing is deforming the expectations of apocalyptic literature.
Oh, that's fun.
So they're not formal yet because the genre hasn't even been named, but there's expectations.
Right.
And part of what the writer in Revelation is doing
subverts.
Exactly, is intentionally subverting the expectation. Now, Daniel is a much more straightforward example of what we call apocalyptic literature.
Okay. Right.
I'm arguing that the writer of Revelation is using images like Daniel and then twisting them at the last second. So he's like, okay, you're like, I know where this is going. And he's like, no, you don't. And he's constantly doing that with politics and with religion and all these things.
Right.
So in that sense, Revelation absolutely depends on Daniel because you don't get the same sort of emotional twist unless you know stories like Daniel that set you up to have an expectation. Yeah. So, I mean, all this stuff is fascinating the way it interacts. But back to Daniel.
Back to Daniel as the text for this series. I chose it.
Yeah. But why? Yeah. Like, where did it come from?
Well, there's like explicit emotion in the text. Again and again, we see Nebuchadnezzar as this character who expresses anger and fury and rage. So I was like, okay, it's on the page there. So that was really interesting to me.
But I think that's the least interesting thing of what you did, which was the way that you took this story that's clearly about anger and rage in Nebuchadnezzar, and you looked for these sort of underlying pieces between the lines of where is anger being expressed in different ways. Like, I mean, that's the piece that when I read your sermon and then watched it, I mean, those are the pieces that I found myself going, oh, like, this is really neat. And we used the term
Midrash.
Yeah, where do we use that? In the Zoom lobby we were talking to somebody about it.
Zoom.
Oh no, it was in our call. Whatever.
Well, we talked about it, and then
it came up.
And then it came up exactly because someone who joined us for the Zoom lounge was like, "I never thought of Daniel as an angry character."
Yeah.
And because we see the explicit rage of Nebuchadnezzar on the page, but we don't see the explicit anger of Daniel. And I just could not, the more I got into that story, I thought, how could you not carry some anger with you if you were forced to leave your home? They changed your name. It just has like slavery and abuse, all over it. Of course you have some anger. What you've done with it, how you've metabolized it is another thing. So I wanted to lend that emotion to that character, not only have it sit, because my point of the first message was about new interpretations, about new interpretation of the dream. That's what happens with Daniel saving lives and interpreting this dream. And then I wanted to have an opportunity to reinterpret anger as something not to be feared, but as something that can alert us to something, as alert us to something that needs to change, some level of like alert in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was brilliant, but part of what I thought was so brilliant about it was just even the way that you're shaping and teaching us how to read scriptures in that, and the framework I used was Midrash, where there, you don't see that on the page in an explicit sense.
Right.
So how do we have the sort of, reading imagination to say, like, what's happening in Daniel in this moment? And then the freedom to be able to say, well, I've thought of this. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to explore it.
Yes.
I don't need necessarily it to be spelled out for me on the page for me to explore what could be going on here behind the text and how would that then compare to what's happening in Nebuchadnezzar. And as a reader, not just you, but as a historical reader, what are you picking up on in these themes and how's that playing out? And I think sometimes the Bible becomes, sadly, this one book that we teach ourselves to read sort of, I don't know what the language would be, but almost very naively.
Right.
Like if it's not spelled out for me, then I can't go there or I can't imagine that.
Right.
And yet we don't read other books that way. Like there's books that hint at emotion. There's books that hint at motivations in characters.
Yeah.
And then we fill in the gaps. Like that's why we read. I don't read a book just for the person, to tell me everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless I'm reading Tolkien or something and I want him to explain every little detail of every little song that everybody sang and where they went and who went.
Right. I mean, people do go back to Tolkien again and again and again. So I was going to make a point that like, if these stories spelled out all the things all the time, would we need them? Would we struggle with them? Would they be good conversation partners? Right. I would think no, they get boring.
Yeah. I mean, it may be in different ways, but I think part of what is so powerful about the scriptures is the way that it invites our imagination. Yeah. And that's where Midrash comes in, because Midrash was this sort of Hebrew practice. So there's the Talmud, for people who aren't familiar with some of these terms. There's the Tanakh is the Hebrew Bible, essentially, what Christians call the Old Testament. Torah, which sometimes gets used as a frame for it, is actually only the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses, the law of Moses. So Tanakh is the whole thing. And that's an acronym for Torah, Ketuvim, and...
Come on, you got this.
I know.
I can't remember
the writings. The writings of the prophet and the law, anyway. Yeah. It's an acronym for that. But... where was I going with that? Oh, but then there's the Talmud that comes along with that, which is in...
what time period?
So there's 2 Talmud. Yeah. There's the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. But essentially, they're both in the period of post-exile. Yes. So in exile in Babylon, and then another exile, or another Talmud is the coming back to Jerusalem. Right. So you're talking like 500 to 200 before the Common Era. But the Talmud are interpretations of Tanakh. So here's a story. This is what it means, is my interpretation. Beautiful thing about the Talmud is there's all kinds of different interpretations. So you will read each of the great rabbis.
They're not all like in agreement.
They're not in agreement at all.
They're
in conversation with each other. Yeah. Now, if you ever find a copy of the Talmud at the library or something, it's very hard to read. It's not organized the way that, Caucasian white people are used to. It's, the ways that they've put things together are just, not familiar for us. But I mean, if you find a rabbi or a Jewish person who can walk you through it, I mean, there's a lot in there. But yeah, it's going to be different interpretations. Right. Midrash, though, is a little different. So there's the Mishnah and there's the Midrash, which were rabbinic stories that filled the gaps.
Yes. Yeah.
So the Talmud is like interpretations of what the story meant.
Right.
The Midrash
is more like, what if this happened?
Exactly.
Which I love that. I just love that. It's like exercise of imagination.
Yeah. So what's happening between...
And like this picture of rabbis being like, oh, what if this person would have got together with that person? And then the next one says like, no, like imagine what if this would have happened? And they're like, it's not on the page at all. Yeah. It's these exercises.
So it's not so much interpretive. This is what it means. Right. It's more just like filling the gaps. It's like fan fiction that fills in. It is, and then Talmud is the debate about what the stories meant. Yes. And this is the beautiful thing is in that Hebrew tradition, you have the scriptures, you have the interpretation, you have the fan fiction that goes along with it. And all of that is part of the mix constantly as you're teaching as a community. It's not all equal to the scriptures. The scriptures are still the scriptures in the Hebrew tradition. Right. But they also give so much value and honor to these other ways of thinking and writing. And I think that's something that's missing in Christianity. Right. And it's not about devaluing the scripture. For it. Yeah, it's not about devaluing the scripture. Scripture is still scripture. Yeah. Scripture is still the guiding principle that we have that orients us. Right. But what you did in the sermon was essentially that kind of midrash where it's like, this is what I see on the page with Nebuchadnezzar. This is what I know about Daniel in terms of the history of this character. Right. Here's what comes naturally to me as the most real and honest emotion that this person is having, and here's how they respond to it. Yes. And I love that kind of stuff. Right. Especially when, we mentioned the Joseph series before. Yeah. But in Genesis, we get a different kind of writing where we get a lot of like this happened and then this happened, and very little in terms of motivations. Yeah. And so there's tons of Midrash and tons of Talmud debating why Abraham did this or why did Joseph do that. Well, that's where the stories really come alive. Is when you start asking like, what's going inside of Daniel? Yes.
Well, there's this great line in the text where, do I have it at the ready? Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar that God has given him understanding to know what's in his mind. But the translation is like, it's not just mind, it's like what's in his inner man, like what's in his heart, that actually really matters to the divine. And I also loved that invitation and that pull in the text that like, we're thinking about a new interpretation of anger as something that can mobilize and energize and alert us. So and like it's absolutely a part of the human experience. And this line that like that the divine would care about what was in the heart, the inner man, of this kind
and you
of
also have
thinking.
you have these Indian cultures where they're like, we talk about our heart, we talk about our head, sometimes we talk about our gut, but the anatomy that ancient cultures ascribe to sort of different seats of intellect and emotion were all different in these cultures. So, I mean, and they just didn't have this strict delineation that we have sometimes, like when the Psalms talk about your kidneys all the time, and Jesus keeps talking about your bowels. Like whenever Jesus is talking about compassion, he's always talking about your bowels. Like, like your gut is where you feel real compassion for someone. I mean, I just think even those things are more interesting.
The language is very much
it's a much more sort of physical. Your emotions are things that you feel in parts of your bodies. And we have a little bit of that in English, like my head and my heart. Maybe my gut, we hear that a bit. But we don't talk about our emotions like even when we talk our heart, it's not that same like in my kidneys, or in my bowels.
Right. Yeah. More visceral.
Yeah. Viscera. Like there's literally like that means your gut, right? That's where that word comes from. Nice. So yes, I mean like even just that when we hear these things, this language, it's even deeper than that. It's like God cares about all that stuff that's happening in your kidneys and your gut and your the innermost bits.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Innermost bits.
Innermost bits.
That's my own journey with anger. I mean, it's always ongoing, but I just kept gravitating towards books around anger in the last 2 years. Like when I went back through my Goodreads history, I was like, I've been reading about anger and women's anger, for a couple of years. And it felt like, a journey of reinterpreting it and thinking, like I was thinking about the language of like theological anthropology, that like our human experience has something to show us about the divine. So I was just kind of like, I want to form some language around theology and anger for myself. And I think it could be helpful for our community.
Yeah. I want to, there's a question here about, do you think you can be both wise and angry? I want to talk about that because I think that's a really interesting question. But listening to you last week, reading the sermon that's coming this week. I think I am. Better. I'll save it. I mean, we'll talk about that next week. But I have been thinking about, what is my relationship with anger? Because, and I might talk about this a little bit in the video this week in sort of responding to your sermon. But, and you mentioned this a little bit in some ways, but as a white, straight, cisgendered, middle-class man who has resources and people pay attention to me. It's not like I have a whole lot to be angry about.
Right.
I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I don't always love personality stuff, but so I like to get angry about causes. I like to grab a hold of something. But for the most part, anger has been this sort of emotion in my life that I've tried to distance myself from because I recognize that generally my anger is not a positive thing. Right. It's usually something that feeds into the sort of the easiest things for me to lean into is all of my privilege. And the anger that comes most naturally is when I don't get the thing that I'm used to.
I get it.
And I find that frustrating. So then, I think it's been a good and a healthy process for me to say, okay, so how do I then name those things, distance myself from it? But I'll give you something about listening to you. It was that piece of saying, okay, so how does that then, how do I not stop that process? How do I continue to do that? Because that's the appropriate way for me to process anger because of my place in the world and all these things, but then not always project that same expectation.
That's exactly it.
Onto everybody's experience of the world.
That's exactly it. I think that's what's been kind of missing from our faith communities is that the voice that's for so long shaped so many faith communities is a voice like yours. Yeah. And so your experience comes through yours, the capital.
Yeah, totally.
And doesn't sort of open up space for like the anger that is in our communities that would advocate for some more power when there hasn't been enough.
Yeah.
And I think it's made people really sick. Like, I think, that when the virtue was like sort of stay away from anger, people internalized anger, and it's made
then you hold on to the anger, which does become toxic.
Exactly.
And this is the thing. I mean, I hope, people got that in your piece, because I loved, actually, I think I can't remember whether it's coming up in the next sermon or not, but the way you talked about, you can't transform that anger into something, into activism, into love, into something positive until you process it and own it and understand it. And this is the tough thing, is it is true, it is good, it is holy to look at those scriptures and say, hey, like, your anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Anger on its own will never do that. But that doesn't mean we shut that emotion down. We don't let ourselves feel it, because all that does is allow anger to become the thing that's actually driving you somewhere deep inside. And so, when you have, again, like you just said, when you always have someone from the same type of a position whose real sort of struggle with anger is about, okay, how do I name this thing, but how do I realize that, my anger is not valid, and it's just about me wanting to continue to have my privilege and the things that I'm used to. So and how do I set it aside? How do I move forward? If that's the only way that we have to process anger, when you've got people who don't have that privilege and are fighting for their voice and they're fighting for their place, then what happens is we tell them not to feel it, they push it down, and it becomes the thing that's actually driving them from the inside. Rather than giving them the opportunity to process it, to channel it, to transform it into the kind of justice work that needs to happen on the other side. So that's the thing that I took away in terms of my place in the world, listening to you, was not so much that I need to reframe my relationship with anger as much as I need to make sure that my frame is not the lens through which I'm watching.
A good job.
Yeah, exactly. But
But I also like to step back into the text for a moment. This picture of God throwing stones was the thing I
loved the way you framed that.
Yeah, and I just thought, like, what motivates, again, like, let's play this out in our imaginations a bit. Like, so the dream goes that, there's this statue, it has weak material in the feet, and Nebuchadnezzar sees a hand, but it is not a human hand. Form a rock, throw it at the statue's feet, and then all of the statue crumbles upon itself, something like that. And then from the rock that was thrown comes a great mountain that fills the whole earth. And I was like, yes, like, this was our exploration around, how to be angry at God, or like, where does our blame go? That kind of natural human reaction to the things that make us really mad. And this idea that, like, God throws stones at, like, brutal empires, at abuse of power, at manipulative, forces, and that was my kind of like climax of the sermon, was this idea of, like, looking to form a new interpretation of anger is to see that something of the, could we say, anger of God towards the things that we've constructed if we practice radical responsibility.
Sure, the wrath of God is being poured out from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of man.
Thank you for quoting all the scriptures tonight.
But this idea,
Bible sword drills over here.
Hey, I've been doing this for a while, though. I got a few of them up the sleeve.
But exactly, this was the imagery was just so much fun, and I have often, like, I haven't found those passages in the scriptures, a dream and a dream interpretation, very interesting, honestly. Like, when it's been taught to me or I've had to read it, I've just been like, oh, okay. I like made myself slow right down and enjoy. And then I thought, oh my gosh, wait, where did the rock come from? What did it do in the scene, in the dream? What happened after it became this incredible mountain that filled the whole earth? I just thought that's like Zion. It's this like gathering of the divine in our midst. Revelations, right? Talks about this, like, God coming to earth, this kind of presence, this mountain presence.
So
returning.
the piece, and we'll talk about this in the series as well, but I think the piece that's important is I always, because of my posture, I always want to be careful when we talk about God throwing stones. And I love the way you framed it. The way you languaged it in the sermon was so perfect.
It's not a people. This is the thing about Nebuchadnezzar gets another. This is what I think. I think that something about whoever formed this character out of like bits of their history. I think they read themselves into Nebuchadnezzar. Like Nebuchadnezzar, we're going to look at 3 stories and he gets a new chance every time. So the stone wasn't at him as a character, you know, we're going to return to him again. And he is going to have this opportunity to like repent, return to
over and over again
and again and again. And I think that the people of God sort of look and see, getting excited, see themselves even in Nebuchadnezzar. And I think that's kind of where you're going. Sorry.
It's great.
It's not the stone doesn't even come for him. It comes for like the forces of this empire that abused and
so Paul's language is, we battle against principalities and powers, not against flesh and blood. Now, sometimes in some circles that gets interpreted as we're fighting against demons and that kind of stuff. It's not what principalities and powers are in the Greco-Roman period. Principalities and powers are empires.
Right.
So that's what Paul's talking about. I think we're working on the journal. I think we're going to do Philippians this year. And Philippians is all about Paul's, so is Colossians. So there's a lot of Paul. But setting Christ against the power of the empire, the Roman Empire. But when Paul talks about our wars against principalities and powers, he doesn't mean Caesar. He doesn't mean Roman centurions. What he means is the Roman Empire that steals your imagination and makes you think that this is all there is. That's what Revelation is about. Revelation is not about the Roman Empire. Revelation is using the Roman Empire to talk about the concept of empire that shuts down your imagination and makes you believe there's nothing more than this. That's what God throws stones at. That's what the violence in Revelation is directed at, is those things that steal our imagination away from us. But the grace of God is always for human beings that are trapped and corrupted and broken and crushed by those things.
Continue to like see compassion
exactly
in this text for Nebuchadnezzar. He is not a villain.
Exactly. So even Caesar is a victim of the Roman Empire. Even Nebuchadnezzar is a victim of Babylonian Empire.
I kept thinking, what were his needs? What needs were unmet in this? Who he goes, and especially the text that you're going to use, he like becomes like a bit of an animal. He does, he gets so detached from his humanity that he roams around the land like as a wild beast.
So then how far do we take this? Because, how do we, and obviously we're talking about anger and we're talking about the righteousness of naming these things and standing up and fighting for justice. But at the other side, and you named some things in this sermon. How do we understand that the victims of white supremacy is all of us?
Yes, exactly.
You and I are victims of white supremacy because it steals our imagination away from us. Like I talked about a couple of weeks ago, we end up, because of this thing that's ingrained into us, like neither you and I are white supremacists. But we can't pretend we're not shaped by those expectations around us. And because of that, at some base level, we learn to look past white people with guns and we're like, they're just crazy. They're fine. And yet, a black kid in a hood out for a jog, we're like, oh, maybe that's a criminal or something like these things are really deep inside of us, even though we would never say them out loud because we're the good white people, right? So we don't say them out loud, but they're deeply shaped in us.
This is why I'm kind of excited that you're doing the third one. This is the like how to be angry at ourselves. A little bit.
But all of those kinds of principalities and powers are stealing something from all of us. I'm not at all saying white supremacy is as hard on me as it is on anyone who's not white. Like I'm like, don't be silly. I'm not trying that. What I'm saying though is anything that steals our imagination away from us is stealing something from all of us all of the time. And Nebuchadnezzar was a victim of the Babylonian Empire, even as he was the person inflicting incredible suffering on people. And he should never get off the hook on that. As a character, he needs to be named for all of the evil and the violence.
I felt like we were sort of working that out a little bit in the conversation.
But I mean, this is the really powerful thing about the scriptures is they refuse to name any of us purely as victim. we can be a victim, but we are more than that.
Totally.
None of us ever is purely aggressor. Like we can be evil, we can do terrible things, but even Nebuchadnezzar is a victim of violence. Like this is what violence does to us. This is what sin does to us. It inverts our imagination of the world. It steals from us all the time. And that's what Christ is trying to bring us back to, is all those things. And chance after chance after chance. If Nebuchadnezzar needs that, if you need that, if I need that. And that's where, again, I found it really helpful from my posture and the ways that I've had to work through and, come to terms with anger and make sense of it for myself, to have that pulled back a little bit and say, again, as a white, straight man with resources, it's not right for me to impose that on, an Indigenous person who has been through the residential school system. And I'm just like, oh, you should just not be angry and you should forgive. Like
Show us your anger.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I hope that anger is not going to eat you up inside and tear you apart.
No, because I will hold it.
But I want exactly.
Show us your anger.
So how are Black people upset about white supremacy right now? How are women upset about being marginalized in the church right now? How do we allow those stories to come to the surface so that that doesn't become the narrative that defines you?
Exactly.
As a woman, as a person, as a pastor.
Which I fight with.
Yeah, totally.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be Bobbi's story.
Totally.
And
you've been really good at
I want that to be be the part of the thing that shapes you. Yeah. But I don't want you always having to be fighting against that. Right. But I don't also want you to have to say, well, I can't feel those things.
No, exactly.
Or when how can I say this gently? But when something comes up and it's like maybe because of the way that you've been marginalized, you're going to take it a different way. Right. I don't want you to have to then say, okay, well, I'm going to stuff that down because I trust Jeremy or I trust Commons. Right. Therefore, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to push that anger aside. Like I want you to be able to say, hey, this is what it is. Right. Yeah. And to be able to share those stories and talk about them. Because then I can respond to them. We can respond to them. We can make changes. We can learn from each other.
We are still always doing that work, like expanding our imagination for what it looks like to have leaders from different aspects of like our population.
Absolutely.
So we're still doing that work, but we're bigger than that. Anyways, we're at an hour.
Are we at an hour already?
Yeah, we're at an hour. So
it always feels like we just like spin our wheels for like 20 minutes, and then we actually get into something that's like really interesting, and then we're like, oh, an hour's up, we gotta go.
Yeah, totally.
Any questions here we want to talk about?
I think
Bobbi's on fire.
Right.
She's literally just on fire all the time.
I think I'm kind of fired up. I try not to be. I have a lot to be grateful for.
Can you expand that point? I'm not sure I understand. We're asking someone else in the chat. Gotcha. Okay.
We might follow up with some of this later.
Yeah, totally.
I'm just taking a look at it, but it's
great. We got into that when we started. We didn't have a chance to check up on that. So,
you know what I was thinking? I mean, we really enjoy. This has been a really nice pattern and rhythm in my pandemic days. Just I bike over now that it's nicer out and hang out with you and we get this interaction. It's really fun. But I also thought, if this is helpful for people, it would be great for you to share it.
Totally.
Like
we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, we're doing it. And the more kind of people who jump in, it's great. And I just thought, if you've really enjoyed the conversation and think it's adding something to your life, then share the links.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're trying to interact more with the chat and stuff too. So if you're on there, post a question. If you're lurking and you haven't asked a question before or made a comment, let us know on there. So appreciate it.
Oh,
all right. This week, Living Room Worship is tomorrow night. On Instagram, you can check that out.
Already? Wow.
I know.
Okay.
That's Wednesday night.
Wednesday, right?
Thursday, I'll have something. Probably, maybe I'll just talk about some of the stuff I talked about today.
Yeah,
put that on Instagram. Friday, we've got a new community challenge.
People keep running with those.
They're great. They're fun.
That's fun.
Yeah. And then this Sunday, we're back for How to Be Angry Part 2. Yeah. Daniel chapter 3.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Cool.
I love that one.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Good night.